Hi, I'm Jeff Joaquin, and welcome to Intentional Conversations. On today's podcast, you're going to hear from our guest, Brett Marcy. Brett is the president of Apollo Communications. You'll learn today how he leans into his leadership team, and also just a dose of humility and how he takes that in as a leader. I know you'll enjoy today's conversation, and you'll find something tangible you can walk away with and apply today. So let's jump right in. Well, Brett, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks for being here. So tell us just a little bit about, what you do, okay? And more importantly, why do you do it?
Yeah, good question. And it's funny, I've been in public relations now for almost 20 years. And when people ask me what I do, it's because generally speaking, people don't know what PR is.
Yeah.
And what I generally tell people is I work to get stories out. Stories about individuals, companies, and organizations, and the goal. Everybody has a story, and it's interesting because there's a great broadcast journalist named Steve Hartman out of CBS. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Hartman. Steve Hartman has long been known for being a great storyteller, and his whole shtick is that everybody has a story. Back in the day, he used to do this thing where he would throw a dart at a map and then fly to that location. Then he would go, this is back in the old days when phone books existed, would go open up the phone book and then randomly pick a name out of that phone book and then knock on the door and then find a story out of that person and tell that story to the world. And he does that now in a different way for CBS, but I've always found that fascinating. I was a storyteller as a journalist for years and have now been telling organizational stories and corporate stories and the stories about individuals for decades now, which has been fun.
What's the feel-good feeling about that? What's the thing that makes you put a little skip in your step when you find a good story?
Yeah, what's funny is for me, it's about exploration. One of the things that one of the questions that I was sent earlier as sort of a prep for this was, what did you want to be when you were a kid? And people were always surprised when I tell them I wanted to be a chemist. I don't have a scientific bone in my body. But the reason I think I liked the concept of chemistry is that I love the exploration piece of it, the fact that it's all about discovery, learning something new. And I quickly found that through journalism and through public relations and marketing, you go on this journey of exploration, an exploration of people and of organizations, the world around us, and it is endlessly fascinating for me. And if you can do it for good people and good organizations and good companies, it makes you feel even better.
Yeah, you find yourself going places you didn't think necessarily you're going to end up.
I have had the good fortune of having two incredible careers, both a journalistic career and now a public relations career. And in both of those careers, I have had the benefit of meeting really unique and incredible people with, I would say very engaging stories. And from the perspective of public relations, I work with a wide variety of clients, nonprofits, government groups, corporations, small businesses, large businesses, you name it. And regardless of size, scope, industry, they all have a need in some respect. And it's a pressing need that matters to them from either from an operational bottom line or because they have a need in the community. They need to get their message out. And if they don't do it, there will be some sort of consequence. It's either a consequence for the community, the end user, the customer, et cetera, or there's a consequence to the organization of the company, the bottom line. So it's fun for me to be able to attack a problem at a strategic level, break it down, and really try to simplify the message and get it out to the people who need to know.
Yeah. So I would imagine in both your careers that you've run into a little bit of like, what did I just do? And because we all make mistakes, right? We all do things that we wish we could rewind the clock and do it just a little differently. What might be one of those? And I guess more importantly, I'd be curious, how did you handle it?
Yeah.
Both personally, emotionally, and then on the outside to repair.
Well, it's a lesson in humility, right? Everybody makes mistakes, but the scale of it is what matters. I remember distinctly, this was a journalistic mistake, but I'll tell you about a PR one as well. But I remember distinctly making a mistake in an article that I wrote that ended up getting picked up by the Associated Press wire. So that mistake got pushed out far and wide.
Uh-huh.
We needed to correct it. It's just a journalistic principle of correcting your mistakes. I don't mind correcting my mistakes. I think it should be done. But you certainly have a level of humility when not only do you have to correct it in the community for which you work, but also you have to correct it far and wide across the Associated Press wire service. So
Yeah.
that, the way you handle it is you acknowledge it and regret it and move on. Learn from it and move on. And on the public relations side, I would say that the mistakes are, what would be the best way to describe it? I think the mistakes are more at a higher level.
Yeah.
I've been managing people in various capacities over the course of my public relations career, and I think what I failed to do on numerous occasions, frankly, was to be able to trust the work of the people.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about failure that just scares the heck out of me. Always has, right? It's what's driven me.
Well, what's your biggest fear?
Failure. And stop. Failure. Always has been.
What happens if you fail?
Well, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, I don't know how I would have responded.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I would respond that if and when I fail, because it's not an if, it's a when. If and when I fail, I pause, I learn from it, and I try to grow. But for a good portion of my career, I don't know that I did a lot of that. And it's funny because I think a lot about failure today probably because of my age. But I've been fortunate to have a lot of success. I certainly have had some failures. But I wasn't purposeful about failing. And I do believe that the most successful people are purposeful about being willing to fail.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was a failure.
I think we call it failing forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that concept, thank you for saying that, because I will tell you that concept and that phrase was new for me as of maybe 5 years ago. And it was so eye-opening, mind-blowing, and freeing. This concept that it's okay to fail. And if you are willing to take the risks and expand those risks for purpose, and it doesn't work out, it's okay. The world doesn't end.
Yeah.
And in fact, something better will come out of it because you learned something. But
if you learn something.
you have to be open to it, right?
Yeah.
But you also have to be open to take the risk in the first place.
Yeah.
I used to always say that I was not a risk-averse person as long as it was calculated risk. And the challenge with that way of thinking is that not every risk can be calculated.
Right.
Sometimes you can't see what's coming forward.
Right.
You just got to take the leap. And that has always been my my blind spot. But I like to say that is a blind spot that is starting to go away, and I've got my eyes open. And candidly, I think that that part of that comes with age. I think for a lot of people, and myself included, I think the pandemic gives you new perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, my perspective on the world around me, my life, my professional life, my personal life, all of it, just like many, many other people, all of it was completely upended and shifted through the pandemic. And I'm oddly grateful for it.
What stands out the most in all of that in terms of as it relates to you or maybe your clients, some of the biggest, without divulging,
Sure. Yeah. Candidly, it's about balance. And all of my clients, without exception, are struggling with the same basic tension of high performance, employee engagement and retention, and growth that's manageable that also allows for balance. Every client is dealing with that same tension.
Yeah.
And if you can sort of home in on that, really sort of peel back some of the layers, understand what the key issues are, and then attack them, you end up helping the individuals all the way up through the entire organization.
Nice.
And it certainly helps me.
Yeah. What are like some of the one or two tangible things that you feel you did that helped that process?
Well, for me, it was taking a breath. It sounds so obvious, but it isn't. I had to be purposeful about taking time, thoughtful, mindful breath. And it's interesting because whenever I go into a new client engagement, the first thing I do is I have a meaningful, thoughtful conversation. In some cases, that can be challenging because they might be in the midst of a crisis. I do an awful lot of crisis communication work. I do a lot of issue management work. So some things are time sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing is ever so time sensitive that you can't take a minute to really peel back the layers of what's happening. And then when that happens, you can really sort of home in on the issues that are at play. And I've seen it time and time again. I've got multiple clients right now that have what I would call urgent or emergent issues. And in those cases, in every single case, the emotion runs high. But once we take a breath and we start to really identify the issues that are at play, the people that we need to talk to, the various audiences that we need to target, that's when they really understand that it's manageable. You're breaking it up in pieces for them.
Yeah.
So they get to see the bigger picture and the fact that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Let's jump back a little bit. You in basically two careers, journalism, right? And now public relations.
Both a ton of fun.
Very related. What was the tipping point? What did you go through? What was the process in change? Like change is a big deal for people, and you're not the only person that's changed careers.
Yeah, that's right.
And what are maybe a couple of the learnings of in that shift or in that change or that season that you would want to share?
Well, that's a really good question. And it's been a bit.
Yeah.
But I can still really remember it.
I'm
So
sure.
I had mentioned to you that I used to pride myself in calculated risk. One of the reasons for changing my career from journalism was that I believed that I had hit a bit of a tipping point. A lot of success in my relatively young career, but I was at a point at which if I was going to move up, I was probably going to need to move away.
Mm-hmm.
I really like Central Pennsylvania. I've grown to love the South Central Pennsylvania market. It's now been my home for almost a quarter of a century. But even back then, I was probably pushing on 5 or 6 years, and I knew that this was a place that I could grow and stay, and I wasn't ready to leave. And so, seeing where I was in my journalism career, I had to figure out what I was going to do, and I pursued in my head a lot of different options.
Yeah.
Even pursued law, which is sort of ironic since Apollo Communications is owned by a law firm. But thought about becoming a lawyer, thought about going into a lot of different directions, sales, et cetera. And public relations felt like an easier fit, a more natural fit. I wasn't sure that I'd be good at it, and I wasn't sure that I would like it. And the odd thing is that I thought that it would be all about media relations, traditional media, basically the area in which I had come from. And it turned out to be the opposite. What I found was it was a home for my strategic brain,
Right.
where I could use my writing skills and that sort of bizarre journalistic trait where we can break down complex issues pretty easily. I could use that while also using the strategic portion of my brain, which I think I needed to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, I think that it was a bit of a calculated risk, a necessary one. I embraced it, and I went all in. But that goes back to the last point that I was making around balance. I've been all in since probably before I was in college. And so this concept of being willing to take a pause and a breath, figure out what direction you're in, what direction you're going, that's been really helpful to me. And it's been probably the hallmark of why I've been able to be at least reasonably successful in my career.
Yeah, and so this question is probably might have some redundancy in your answer, but
right.
If you were to go back now
Yeah.
and coach your younger self, right?
Yeah.
Because you're old now,
Yeah.
right?
No kidding. Look at the gray.
So if you were to go back and coach your younger self, what might be the one thing that you would want to impress upon yourself?
Ease up. I probably would ease up.
Mm-hmm.
Those who know me to be a pretty laid back person, but from a career standpoint, I've been a hard charger for 20 something years. What am I talking about? I'm old. It's been about 30 years. But all that being said, that can serve you well in small doses. And where I needed to ease up was in my control of the work and the processes. And I think, candidly, I would have been more successful more quickly had I recognized the balance between a desire for great, consistent product, aka perfection,
Mm-hmm.
And the need for growth.
I
I think I was pursuing perfection at the peril of growth.
So what's a thing? What's a tactic? What's a tangible way to ease up? What can someone actually do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Purposeful conversations. Interestingly, this conversation we're having right now is probably a conversation that I should have had more frequently with my managers and with the people whom I was managing. And if those types of conversations, I think, help to bring out hidden issues that might be under the surface, boiling up,
Yeah.
and can help in managing some of those issues. The work of public relations, in particular, public relations and marketing are related, and there's a lot of synergies there, and there's a lot of overlap there. But public relations, in particular, is virtually a 24/7 job. You're almost always on call. There's a lot of crises that occur. There's a lot of urgent need. So it is high stress, high reward, but high stress. And I think having purposeful conversations to try to manage that stress will go a long way. And candidly, I'm not sure that anyone in virtually any industry has really hit the mark on this. But we're working on it, right? I mean, I've certainly read a number of books on balance, work-life balance, and I've read plenty of books on purposeful conversations. And books is one thing. I think ingraining it in the culture is something different.
Yeah.
And it's something that I intend to do with Apollo.
That's good. Got about a minute left.
Yeah, sure.
This has been great. What's on the horizon for Brett?
Growth.
Yeah.
Purposeful growth. And growth that allows the people who are doing the work to do it to the best of their ability. So from my perspective, I think it's really important that you lean on the people who can do the work the best. I certainly have my core skills, but there are a lot of things I can't do. Here's an example. I'm not a designer. My older brother is the artist in the family, and he is a graphic designer. I can barely draw stick figures. I want to lean on the creative people in the world to help get the job done. Creativity plus strategy plus writing and storytelling. Frankly, that's the magic. That's where the magic is.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today for Intentional Conversations. Our hope is that this will inspire you at some level, something you've heard today that will be a takeaway for you. Maybe you'll share it with a friend or a family member or someone in business. Intentional conversations are exactly that. They're made to be intentional. I hope you have some.